Republican minority leader just keeps coming.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Taco Comfort Solutions.
Kind of like a legal freight train, to be honest with you. There's a litigation that the minority leader, Blake Filippi, has brought to the State House, really, to the courts, but to the State House, which has got a lot of people unnerved. And it may cross an intersection that will be very interesting here in the state. Will reform come from it? Not sure. We'll talk with him about his latest press conference late last week, coming up in a couple of minutes. Welcome in. Yes, we're working live on this President's Day. Well, this show is never live. Well, someday it might be live. Anita, you want to go live one day? Just kind of break in. And Eric, what do you think? We'll just come in and we'll just knock the place over and just say, hey, news, shut up. We're doing... Anyway, we tape this show at the early afternoon portion of the day, and you see it at 7:30 and midnight. But it is same day today. We didn't take the day off. Got nothing going on. There'll be golf days in the summer. In the meantime, this race for the presidency is becoming more and more interesting on the Democratic side, with Bloomberg now spending so much dough and getting so much traction, as I told you he would, that the candidates are now offended at his very existence, and I understand why. Here's the latest.
The American people are sick and tired of billionaires buying elections.
Bloomberg's approach seeks to turn the nomination process, with its emphasis on early contest and momentum building, on its head.
Jobs creator, leader, problem solver.
He's on track to spend more than $415 million before Super Tuesday. That's when he'll be on ballots for the first time and where he hopes to vault into contention for the Democratic nomination.
I think he cannot hide behind the airwaves and the money.
Bloomberg is also facing criticism for his support of stop and frisk. He has apologized for the anti-crime tactic that allowed police to search suspects without a warrant. From 2011 to 2012, more than 80% of those stopped were black or Latino. Nearly 90% were found to be innocent.
$60 billion can buy you a lot of advertising, but it can't erase your record.
Bloomberg is also under fire for lawsuits filed over the years alleging that he created a culture of sexual harassment at his company. In a statement, the Bloomberg campaign responded, quote, "Mike simply does not tolerate any kind of discrimination or harassment."
We in our party hold ourselves to the highest standard, and it is going to be critical for us to have a nominee who can authentically lead.
Counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, seized on Bloomberg's past comments on stop and frisk.
The philosophy was to castigate and denigrate people of color,
ignoring President Trump's support for the practice, which he advocated for in Chicago in 2018.
Stop and frisk. It works, and it was meant for problems like Chicago. It was meant for it. Stop and frisk.
You know what's fascinating about what's going on right now with Bloomberg's entry into this race? It is like checkmate all over the place. Bloomberg jammed up for his old philosophy on stop and frisk. Trump really can't bust his chops because of that, what you just saw. Bloomberg, sexual harassment problems. That didn't stop Donald Trump, so I don't know what level the Democrats think they're operating on in terms of higher plane. Pete Buttigieg speaking for the entire party, like that's the kind of stuff that would rule out Michael Bloomberg's legitimacy in this whole thing. The play is going to be whether he participates in this Nevada debate this week. And he very well may qualify because the Democrats, call an audible on the criteria. But he may not show up. If you got the money, just fly above it as long and as far as you can. It's going to be really interesting. We'll see. And oh, by the way, did you hear today that the float right now is that he might try to recruit Hillary Clinton to be his running mates? That's a whole show. In the meantime, I just saw this little ditty in the newspaper today in the Providence Journal. I thought I have a theory on this. I didn't even think to ask Blake about this. Maybe we'll call an audible as well, and I'll ask him about this. He's quick on his feet. I always throw him a little curveball anyway. There's this whole big to-do. You got Senator DePalma there. He's trying to redesign the license plate, and he's begging for it. I mean, he wants it so bad he can taste it. I don't know why it's such a big deal for him. I don't know that Rhode Islanders are running around clamoring for new license plates. We need new ones just in terms of making sure that they can be read and that the police can investigate with them. The governor's office has been very slow to respond to the request for a new design. I have a theory. I think it's because Cooler and Warmer blew up so bad that she just doesn't want to have a hand in the redesign. What she should do is just say, hey, listen, you guys want it so bad, legislate it, design it, and take it away. But she's keeping it close to the vest administratively. Not even the DMV can handle this. I think she's afraid of another creative screw-up. Audible, cut to Filippi. Do you think so?
I have no idea what's in anyone's head.
About anything? Anymore?
Not about anything. Ever? With this story.
It's kind of weird, isn't it?
I'm not focused on it.
Neither is the governor. Oh, but I don't think, you know what, it's one of those things, it's like you do more, the risk reward is probably not there for her. She hasn't done well on the creative stuff. Why get into the meddling on this whole thing? Put the design out. Talk radio goes nuts over the design. Everyone's got a point of view. Everyone's upset. Then they bring it back to a consultancy and they draw it back. And is there a way you think she can just carve out the responsibility and kind of go, you do it?
Well, let's just go back to the sailboat.
You know what? I don't even remember the sailboat.
It was beautiful. It was before the wave.
It was before the wave.
Yeah, it's before the wave.
Okay, that's all we have to say about that. Let's put the next headline up. Yes, it's all this. And let's hear Anita's story so we can set the table.
Last week, House Republican leader Blake Filippi sent letters to the other 4 leaders on the Joint Committee on Legislative Services asking for a meeting, but they refused, citing an ongoing lawsuit Filippi filed last month over the way the powerful committee operates.
Their refusal to even meet demonstrates why our lawsuit is necessary.
The lawsuit was filed after House Speaker Nicholas Mattiello had JCLS order an unusual audit of the Rhode Island Convention Center without the required majority vote. He has since canceled the audit, but a grand jury is now probing his motivations. During an interview last month on Newsmakers, Mattiello defended his control over the JCLS.
We always operate through the chairman, like every board across the country.
We should
does.
point out you're the chairman.
I'm the chairman of the committee.
However, state law states the Speaker should have first received a majority vote from the committee to authorize the audit. In a letter responding to Filippi's invitation, Speaker Mattiello and Majority Leader Joe Cicarci said in a statement in part, "Please note that you do not have the authority to unilaterally call a meeting of the committee." In a separate letter, Senate leaders said although they have advocated for meetings of the JCLS in the past, their attorney recommended they do not attend now because of Filippi's pending lawsuit.
We have people in this building who think that they can unilaterally control the operations of this building and make decisions which are supposed to be made by a majority of the JCLS.
The JCLS has not formally met in years.
It's fascinating. You continue to work on this, and I applaud your effort. What was we only have a minute or two in the segment, then we'll kind of flesh it all out. What was the intent of the press conference last week specifically?
I think it was to announce our attempts to amicably resolve this outside of the court system have failed.
And you said in the press conference, I think the takeaway that most media at least brought with them was that most everything that goes on in the State House is done unlawfully.
Well, let's distinguish. It's not the legislation we pass. You have like the legislative acts, which all done legally, all the votes, all the bills are passed properly. It's the administrative aspects of the General Assembly, which in my opinion are legally questionable.
Because they're not authorized by the full sanction and vote of the JCLS board members.
As required by law.
Which has never happened in decades.
Correct.
Okay, got that? We'll dig in when we come back. Stay with us.
Did you violate the statute by ordering the audit?
No, we always operate through the chairman, like every board across the country
We should
does.
point out you're the chairman.
I'm the chairman of the committee. I inquired of one person, and I was told that it was basically a personnel matter, and I had no other involvement with that.
Again, you know, we've had a handful of conversations with Representative Blake Filippi, the minority leader, one member of the JCLS. The JCLS is the operating administrative arm of your General Assembly. There are 5 members who control it: the chairman, the Speaker of the House you saw there, the Senate President, the Senate Minority Leader, and the House Majority Leader and House Minority Leader. 5 members, 3 on the House, 2 on the Senate side. And that clip refers to the case that was catalytic to all of this, which we can't assume that everybody gets because it's a complicated situation. It's the audit of the Convention Center Authority that the Speaker ordered without the sanction of the rest of the body, reportedly in response to a buddy of his getting jammed up on a personnel matter. It was fix it or you'll get an enema. That's the story, at least as it goes. It's under grand jury investigation because all the players in it have been called to the grand jury, have been open about it. And the Speaker kind of weirdly says, the process has nothing to do with me, which is a very naive way of saying, I'm the target. And he knows that, and I don't think he understands that people aren't stupid. When you're not being called in front of the grand jury on something that you had something to do with, you're the target of the investigation. So we'll see how that whole thing is going to go down. This notion, though, that he has this autonomous power is more cultural than it is legal. I think you've got him in one sense. I think when you went to the court to stop the audit process, and then simultaneously the Convention Center Authority caught onto the momentum and said they wouldn't participate in it, and then asked the state police for an investigation, I think you were on the right track, right? Because courts are more inclined to say stop something than they are to say do something, right?
Correct.
So you did a very strategically deft thing in getting involved in that, and the Speaker backed off and withdrew the audit without order from the court. So that part of the case is what removed because there's no need. Yes?
It's the emergency, the illegal audit, the injunctive relief, the emergency injunctive relief we were going for has been removed.
Right.
But that audit is still an example that we're pleading of this ultra-virus action by the Speaker without coming to the JCLS. And there's innumerable examples
of
unlawful action by the Speaker without coming to JCLS.
Meaning things that have always been done by the Speaker that no one thought twice about until this one crossed a hair on your professional wazoo and you stepped in.
And it's not just the act.
Because you've had things done that probably could have, I mean, you made a great call, turned out to maybe not be, I think what you did put pressure on both the IGT and Twin River folks as they came together for a deal on the big gambling thing.
Are you talking about the consultant?
Well, you waited for the consultancy thing.
Totally right.
That thing, so I don't want to lose anybody here, but Representative Filippi also took, I think, a very smart action when he asked the General Assembly's leadership to authorize a consultancy to advise the General Assembly on what you should do with gaming. I think under the umbrella of your litigation, that order for that consultancy was probably a JCLS action.
All day.
That needed 5 votes.
All day.
So you've benefited, not you personally, but your actions have benefited from the culture in the past. But you grabbed the Speaker on this one because you didn't like what he was doing. Most people didn't.
There's a lot to respond to.
Well,
all right,
but you understand what I'm saying.
I understand what you're saying, so I'll address it. I concede that prior actions, not just that one, but probably employment actions involving the minority office also are questionable.
Okay.
But there comes a point where the Rubicon is crossed, where there's the last straw on the camel's back, this illegal audit coupled with the Speaker's legal interpretation that he alone makes decisions for JCLS and he alone is the majority and can do these things, it crossed the red line for me. Sometimes you can't come back once that line is crossed.
Okay, going back to the judge though, what is the main objective of the lawsuit? Are you asking the courts to instruct the JCLS to meet on a regular basis and to going further into the future, make all systemic decisions by vote? You're not asking to reverse anything that's already happened.
No, we're not asking to undo the ball that's been wound in the past. I don't think a court would do that.
Okay.
But we're asking the court to declare what our statute means, and we're also asking for injunctive relief to prevent future unlawful acts. Unlawful acts being decisions made without JCLS. Now, JCLS can always meet and vote to delegate some of those decisions, let's say to buy pens and pencils to our executive director. Right, but we haven't done that, and we need to do it in order to make these actions lawful. So we're actually asking the court to declare our rights under the statute, declare the Speaker's rights as chairman under the statute, and also to seek injunctive relief going forward.
I'm not sure that you're going to be successful there. This is going to be really fascinating.
Yeah.
Because the balance of the JCLS members will say that this is a separation of powers issue, meaning the courts have one role, legislature has another. I think the political pressure that you're putting on inevitably is the tool that requires the JCLS to behave in a more statutory fashion.
Well, let's stay on the legal issue for a second, right? You know, you tried to describe, and I try and describe the JCLS, and it's difficult to describe to people.
Right.
So I came up with an analogy which I think works. Your JCLS is like a 5-member town council where the chairman, Mattiello, refuses to call meetings or take votes, and he unilaterally appoints the town manager, Frank Montanaro, and they proceed to spend $46.5 million of your money without any oversight. That's describing what's going on. Now, your question about whether the courts would get involved on a separation of powers issue, right? Mm-hmm. The best argument against our lawsuit. What other laws is JCLS not subject to? Are we not subject to our state labor laws? Can we pay people less than minimum wage just because it's in the State House? Are we not subject to state?
Do we?
No.
Okay.
No, of course we don't. But could
hypothetically?
I don't think we could. And you have to remember that JCLS is established via statute.
So you're saying because the JCLS has to operate under the law,
you have to separate legislative acts from administrative acts. Legislative acts, I think all day you're right. The court's not going to get involved on how we do bills, how we go about our business on the floor, committee votes, etc. But this is an administrative function established by statute. A statute with the General Assembly.
But the statute doesn't demand right now the regular meeting of the JCLS.
No, it doesn't demand a regular meeting. It says what JCLS is empowered to do. I think implicit, strongly implied in that is that the JCLS must decide.
Agreed. I agreed. Wouldn't it though be a legislative remedy for the legislators to put specific legislation in that demands that the JCLS behave on a more formal and transparent and regular official basis?
The legislature could always make the JCLS statute better. I think this JCLS statute we have now is clear that we do need to meet, and we can meet once and delegate that authority away. But I think we need to meet at least a few times to set the framework of how that building is to operate. I think we should be meeting consistently.
I think you should probably be meeting monthly or quarterly.
Agreed. The proposed
but I think
rules.
it doesn't say that in the statute.
No, it doesn't say that in the statute.
So I think so enhancing the statute is probably the remedy. And if I'm a judge, I say, all this stuff coming up, it's a dilemma, but it really is the responsibility of the legislature to manage itself under the statute.
Understand completely. And my response is that this is the administrative portion of the legislature. It's hiring, firing, etc. That's totally separate from the legislative function. Think about it. So as a member of JCLS, can I just start demanding things of the treasurer? I'm one member. I want you to pay this bill. That's asinine. It's asinine. And if the treasurer started paying those bills, how would my fellow members, what remedy would they have other than to go to court?
But because the culture of the chair running the show unilaterally has been in place, the minority leader doing so would be laughed at.
But suppose there was a Republican treasurer, and I start telling the Republican treasurer, yeah, pay that bill. I didn't have a meeting of JCLS, no one voted on it, but pay that bill. Are you telling me that my Democratic members on JCLS can't seek redress in the courts?
Yes, I think they can. That's the point. I think it's one of those things where every time some kind of infraction type of move is made, the court can remedy the infraction. But I don't know that the court can establish a regular process of doing business.
That's what, we're not asking the court to say you have to meet. We're asking the court to declare what this statute means and also stop taking these acts without a vote. The JCLS doesn't have to meet and vote at that point, but
stop
it can't.
Taking what acts? They're all hypothetical.
Hiring people,
they're all in the
appointing
future.
People.
Okay, so but those are regular and sundry acts.
Things are happening daily in that building. I mean, it's a $46.5 million
budget.
You're almost spending $1 million a week.
It's really fascinating. What a case that's going to be. That's a very tough case, and the Supreme Court will end up making that decision.
Definitely.
Without a doubt.
Or my fellow members can come together, agree with me to change the rules as I proposed, and meet once every 2 months, resolve the lawsuit, we move on and take care of other things.
And they were trying to get together, and when we come back, we'll tell you what the excuses were for not. Stay with us. Representative Blake Filippi, the minority leader and one of the 5 members of the JCLS. You know, it's funny, I said on the radio the other day, you were on with Matt Allen, And I followed in the next hour and said, listen, I just have to ask a question. Does anybody know what this thing is? That's your biggest learning curve. Your analogy of a town council is perfect, and you should keep, jamming it home, because people get that there's something going on, but it's but then again, you also can't just sit there and wait for the public to come along sometimes. You have to lead, follow, and get out of the way, right? So you asked, via the momentum of our last segment, for the other members, the House Speaker, the Senate President, the respective, the Majority Leader of the House and the Minority Leader of the Senate, to come together and just fix this stuff. What happened? They said they wanted to meet, but because you're suing them, lawyer John Tarantino told the Senate guys, don't show up, he's suing you.
And then the Speaker...
what could you have done in a meeting that would have upset the lawsuit?
Listen, I tell my clients...
Tarantino's a really good lawyer.
He's a smart guy.
But he's just picking on this one. This is like sport.
Listen, it's easy to resolve. Let's sit down, let's plan out, let's change our rules, set some meetings.
And the Speaker and the Majority Leader said, oh yeah, they'd show up too. But because the lawyer advised the Senate guys not to come, they said, oh, we're not coming.
We're not coming if the Senate doesn't come. Now, Sakarchi...
Kind of like a bunch of teenagers on a Friday night saying, well, yeah, we're all coming. Oh, guess what? They're not coming. Oh, they're not coming. We're not coming.
Sakarchi and the Speaker could have come, and we could have voted on the rule proposals.
Because you have 3 people.
Yeah, you have the majority.
That would really upset the Senate guys, because the big argument for JCLS has not been between parties, it's been between chambers. One has 3, the other has 2, and they don't like it.
But what the proposals I'm proposing to change, the rules I'm proposing to change, the Senate wants. They've been saying for years we want to meet regularly. My rule proposals are saying let's meet 6 times a year in public. You're spending almost $1 million a week. Let's have meetings. I mean, it's simple. And if we enact those rule changes, a lot of the issues in our lawsuit go away. Frank Williams said, former Chief Justice, that courts are where disputes end, not where they begin. This was a good faith attempt to end our dispute and not have to go to court.
You know what you should do? You should just put a meeting up on the agenda and have it.
That's what we did.
Oh, you didn't have it?
No, we put me
have
or everybody together.
No, have it with 4 empty seats.
We were locked out of the room.
Have it in the hallway.
That's what we were gonna. That's what we did on Thursday. We scheduled a meeting. It was set. I gave 7 days notice. Called the meeting for 1 p.m. on Thursday.
You didn't do a mock meeting. Bring it to order.
We didn't do. So the room where we reserved...
I got 30 seconds.
Okay, we reserved the room for the meeting. It was our room to use. And then once they found out that we were having a press conference in lieu of a meeting that they weren't showing up on, they locked the doors on us. Now that's another legally questionable thing. Who decided to lock those doors? Who has authority to lock those doors? I'm on JCLS. Was it the executive director who was never appointed by JCLS?
I think you ought to sue him. Stay tuned on this one. Get informed. Thank you, sir. What you need to do every once in a while is ask your fellow coworker at the water cooler or at dinner or at the bar or at the coffee shop, what's the JCLS? I know, it's not going to be the hot topic of the day, but more people informed on what this thing is and how important it is, the better off for reform and your wallet. Have a great night.